Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. In today's video you will see me use Aqua Cast water-based eco resin to make Valentines themed candle jars. Once done, you will also see me make a candle with a bit of a romantic twist. Not everything went to plan, and because I ended up, sadly, with a smashed pot, it encouraged me to have a go at the art of Kintsugi, which means joining with gold. If all that sounds interesting, stay tuned and enjoy the video. Before we begin today, I just wanted to say, if you've ever had one of those days where everything goes wrong, one thing after another, and you just feel the need to know that it's not just you, well, if that's the case, this video is for you because it's going to show you that for me, I have those days too. So to start with, everything went smoothly. All I had to do was mix up my Aqua Cast. So I poured in my water, weighed that. I'd already worked out my measurements in the usual way using the Aqua Cast calculator on the Elichem website. So yeah, I already knew my measurements. I just needed to pour my water into my silicone jug and then add the powder and give it all a good mix. If you're new to my channel and you've never heard of Aqua Cast before, you might be wondering what it is. Well, it's what's commonly known as an eco resin. I actually find the term eco resin a little bit misleading and I prefer to call it a casting compound. It's similar in a way to plaster of Paris, but it's much more durable. It's got added polymers to make sure that it's strong and it accepts pigments very well, unlike plaster of Paris. The polymers are all fused into the powder, so when you purchase it, all you purchase is the powder and add tap water, and it's as simple as that. Right, once it was all mixed together and it was all nice and smooth, it was time to add the pigment. I wanted to go for a very soft grey colour, and so I used the tiniest bit of black. You do need to be very careful with black pigment because a little bit really does go a long way. So add the tiniest bit at a time and just keep adding it until you're happy with the colour. I didn't mix it in thoroughly because I wanted a slight natural, like a natural stone effect, not a solid grey. So yeah, rather than making a marble effect, I did mix it in mostly. If you were making a marble effect, you would just stir it a little bit. So I did stir it a lot, but not completely. Does that make sense? So after that, things did start to go wrong. The first thing that went wrong was I decided to put it onto my oscillator, which you might have seen me use in a recent video. It's very new. And lots of people gave me advice on the best way to use it. A lot of people said, actually put the Aqua Cast onto the oscillator before you've even started pouring it into the mould while it's still in its jug. Turn it on, get the vibrations going to release a lot of the air bubbles before you even start pouring, which made so much sense. So that's what I did. The only trouble was it vibrated my tripod and my camera, and the whole of the next bit is completely blurry because it's all vibrating. So I'm going to zip through it because you don't want to watch blurry video. I know you don't. So basically what I did was I started it vibrating, got rid of the bubbles as much as I could while it was still in its mixing jug, and then I put the moulds onto the oscillator and filled them a little bit at a time while it was still vibrating. And once they were filled and they'd had a couple of minutes on the vibration plate, then I took them off. And I must add right now, you don't need to use a vibration plate or oscillator. If you're new to this and you're thinking, oh, I don't want to have to buy one of those, you don't need it. You can just tap the sides. It's just something extra I got to try out. Okay, we're back to normality for a short while until everything goes wrong again. So this mould, or these two moulds, the lid and the pot, are brand new. They're from Buan Nicole and I loved them as soon as I saw them, but it was my first time using them and I hadn't realised how thin the pot mould was. And you'll see the problem in just a moment. And I'll just correct myself there. The actual pot mould wasn't thin. The pot that it creates was thin. And you're just about to see what happened. Oh dear, didn't I make a crazy sound? I can laugh now, but at the time I was quite annoyed. And the reason it happened was because the walls of the jar were so thin and I wasn't expecting it. And I needed to have given it much longer to cure and to demold it much more gently with that knowledge. So I poured it again, waited for it to cure, and this time I was a lot more careful. In fact, I got my husband to help so that I didn't have to demold it with so much force. And I can honestly say that that's the first time that's ever happened to me. And yeah, I wouldn't recommend, even though Aqua Cast is so strong and durable, like I was saying before, I wouldn't recommend it for anything too thin. And it did work for this, as long as once I knew I had to be careful and think more carefully about how to demold it and to leave it longer to cure, it was fine. It's just a word of caution, really. It works better if it's not too much of a thin layer. Anyway, we will be coming back to the broken one because I had a brainwave and I managed to save it. So before we do that, let's have a look at this one. Let's see what the lid turns out like because that is the best thing about this mould. And there it is, a beautiful, dreamy little Cupid, and I think it looks gorgeous. And when you look close up and see all the detail on the wings and in the hair, it's just so gorgeous. I love it. And I was looking forward to decorating that a little bit, not too much. I think it would have been easy to go too far with it. It was beautiful just the way it was, but I just wanted to give it a little bit of sparkle, and that will be coming up. Before we do any decorating, let's go back to the original broken pot. I decided to do a little bit of the Kintsugi style and I got a little bit of E6000 plus glue there, just put it out on a silicone mould that was handy, and I glued all the pieces back together onto the pot. And in the process of doing so, I made sure I put plenty of glue onto each piece so that when I stuck the pieces together, the glue would squidge out of the crack a little bit because that would give me the effect later on. So yeah, that's why I'm adding lots and lots. I actually do want it to squeeze out of the cracks. Right, so once that last piece was in position, I took my little shaker pot, which was filled with gold pigment powder, and I just sprinkled it all over the glued areas on the inside and the outside. And you can probably see there's a hole in the side there that I didn't have a piece for. That's okay, we'll sort that out soon. And so here we go with the gold pigment powder, probably the most satisfying part. Actually, no, I think the most satisfying part was when it had dried, when all the glue was dried and I could brush off the excess powder. That's the best bit. But I had to be patient because I didn't want to be brushing that powder off and then smudging all the glue. I had to let it dry. So I left it a couple of hours. The E6000 glue actually takes a whole day, I think, to cure. But to be dry to the touch, a couple of hours was enough. And you can tell I waited a couple of hours because we are now under artificial light and I have the shadow of my camera over my workspace, which is very annoying. But let's get that gold powder off. So by now you might have noticed that I wasn't really as careful as I should have been with my application of glue, and I've got sticky fingerprints all over the place. So afterwards I did try to clean it up as much as I could, but I did have another plan for that as well. So don't worry too much about that. My next job was to fill the hole. I put my silicone glove on and put my finger behind the hole and pressed it firmly, and then I filled the hole with UV resin, cured it under the UV light with my finger still there so that the resin didn't leak through, took my finger off, and all I had to do then was sprinkle on some more powder, because while the UV resin is still slightly tacky, you can add powder and it will stick to it. And then I found my fine-tipped glue pen, which I knew would come in handy one day. It's been stuck in my drawer for a long time. And I made up a few extra lines to disguise the bits where I'd made a mess. So just used my imagination and worked out where the lines might have gone if there were any more cracks in there, and drew some lines on there just to cover up those bits where I'd made a mess, and I added an extra one going down to the base as well. And once the glue had gone clear instead of blue, then it was time to add more gold powder, and you will see the finished thing very soon. Now back to my unbroken jar, and this time I decided I was going to use my HydroFlow satin sealer, which I'm just pouring into a little dish there, and I wanted to add some pigment to it to just give it a very delicate sparkle, and I had some like pearlescent pigment, and I added some of that into there and mixed it up, and it gives you a very subtle sheen on your finished piece. So I thought, let's see how that will work out. I forgot to say that the HydroFlow satin sealer is also from Elichem Resins, just the same as the Aqua Cast. And what a lot of you don't realise is that Aqua Cast is also available in America, so don't forget to check out the links in my video description along with the discount codes. I love making my own paints with the sealer and pigment powders. It just works so well, and you'll see what a difference it makes just applying it to the wings and a little bit of the hair, and it just gives it that extra finishing touch without going too far. I also added a little bit of sheen to the shoulders and to the forearms, and that just gave it a little bit of a highlight, and I liked the result. I used the same sealant with the pigment to seal the pot inside and out, and once that was dry, it was ready for candle wax. I did the same thing for the original jar, but this time I used gold pigment powder with the sealer, and that was so it would match the Kintsugi style which I put on the sides. So it all came together nicely. So let's make the candle. With Valentine's Day coming up and with the Cupid theme of the jar, I thought it would be really nice to make a heart to go on the top of my candle. I found a heart-shaped mould in my drawer which was just about the right size, and so I poured in some wax into there. It was pigmented with some a little bit of red pigment to make it pink. So while my heart was curing, I decided to start to get my jar ready. I've got my wick placement tool here from Buan Nicole. It's got a magnet in the middle, so you can line up your pot on the lines of the placement tool, and then you put your wick into there, and the metal at the bottom of your wick will be attracted to the magnet on the placement tool, and it'll be nice and central. And as you can see, I've got a super long wick there, and you'll see why very soon. Next, I partially filled my jar with some soy wax, and this time there's no pigment in there because I just wanted it to be white. And I'd already worked out what level to pour it up to so that there would be space for the heart when this wax had cured. And next it was time for the candle topper, which I've never done before. It's totally new to me and I wasn't sure if it would work, but the idea was to take a metal skewer and get my kitchen torch and really heat it up. I'm just marking there so I know exactly where the middle is. So yeah, heat up the skewer and just poke it through the heart to make a hole for the wick. I wasn't sure if it would work very well, but you don't know until you try, do you? Luckily, the idea worked well. The hole was possibly slightly too large, but I don't think it will matter once I light the wick. I think it will just be fine. But yeah, that's the reason why the wick is long, because next I need to melt the top of my white candle wax in the jar so that I can slide the heart-shaped down the wick. Oh, I'm forgetting how to speak. Anyway, so I can slide the heart shape down the wick onto the melted wax, so then they will bond together. That was the plan. And as plans go, it was one of my better ones because it worked, and I thought that made a really good finishing touch at the top of my candle. And so, although the process did start with a bit of a disaster, everything turned out okay in the end. And it was good to make something out of the mistake, wasn't it? I think it's good when you can do that. So I was pleased I ended up with 2 jars instead of 1. Let's have a look at them together. Well, you know what? I actually really like them. I do prefer the one that I didn't smash. And I do also wish that I'd been a little bit more adventurous with the colours. Yeah, I think the pale grey is a little bit wishy-washy. I should have gone a bit darker or maybe chosen a different colour altogether. But I've got the mould so I can make as many as I like. I just need to remember to be very careful when I'm demoulding this particular one. As always, links and discount codes to the products I've used today will be in the video description. Please do remember to give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you would like to, and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching and bye for now.